Thank you for joining us for the podcast ministry of Pastor Travis Smith and Brookfield Church, located in Wilmington, North Carolina. To learn more, visit us online at brookfieldchurch.life and connect with us on all social media platforms. We hope you enjoyed today's broadcast.
Judges chapter 6, I'm going to start at verse 6. And it says this: So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. When they cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites. He said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of slavery in Egypt. I rescued you from the Egyptians and from all who oppressed you. I drove out your enemies and gave you their land. I told you, I am the Lord your God. You must not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live now, but you have not listened to me." Pause right here for just a minute. You can leave that up there. Week 1, I talked about the need for the church to be a church of truth and a church of worship. Talked about the shofar. If you know what a shofar is, it was a hollowed out ram's horn, and they would blow that ram's horn for several different things, and it's also a symbol of worship. But see, we have a lot of churches today that they're full of truth, but they have no worship. They don't know how to engage the presence of the King. They're full of information. They know the Bible forwards and backwards, but can I tell you that the religious leaders at the time knew the texts? It was all right here. But when the Master was standing in front of them in the New Testament, they could not recognize who he was. You can have it all right here, but is it right here? Likewise, we have a lot of churches that have, frankly, made an idol out of worship. And we worship. We worship the chills it gives us and the feeling it gives us. And worship has become all about me, and what God does for me and how God makes me feel. And we lack truth. But if you can find a group of people in a church that has a balance of both truth and worship, a shofar and a sword, you've got to have both. Verse 11. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat on the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Mighty hero." Another translation says, "Mighty warrior. The Lord is with you." I left last week calling the Gideons to step up out of the winepress and reminding you that God is with you with everything that you face, with everything that culture is trying to throw on you and on your family and your children and your children's children. Mighty warrior, the Lord is with you. It is time for the people of God. It's time for the Gideons of this world to stand up with both a sword and a shofar and worship God in spirit and in truth and declare kingdom values. It's time. So Gideon was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide grain from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord looked at the man in the pit and said, "Mighty hero," or "Mighty warrior, the Lord is with you." I want you to know today that there is a harvest with your name on it. We are in harvest season in the physical realm right now. We're approaching it. But I believe we're at harvest season in the spirit realm as well. Some of you have been praying for people. You've been praying for situations. You've been praying for salvations. Some of you are praying that God will move on your behalf in certain situations in your life. And I really believe that there are some people attached to this church that are about to step into the greatest harvest season they've ever walked in their life. But the enemy is after your harvest. He wants to take your harvest. Notice how in this story, I talked about this last week. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but the Midianites were so clever. See, they didn't just come in and kill the Israelites. They took more of a terroristic approach. They said, no, we're not just going to kill you. That'd be too easy. We're going to let you live. And we're going to let you tend your fields, plant your crops, and we're even going to let you harvest them. And the moment you've done all the work, we're going to come in and we're going to steal everything from you, and we're going to make you watch your children and your children's children starve. And see, for some of us here today, spiritually, that's what we're walking through. We're walking in a culture, 21st century Midianites that are seeking to get into the school system, seeking to get through social media and all these other means that reach our kids and our teenagers and our young adults. And the current Midianites are doing their best to watch us, to make us have to watch our kids and a generation that we've raised starve spiritually. But I believe that there are some Gideons that God is raising up. And I believe that you will live to see your harvest. But notice how the enemy allows you to reap the harvest, but not enjoy the harvest. He enables you to do the work, but doesn't allow you to take what you have labored for. His objective is for you to do the work and for him to take away everything you've worked for, that you've prayed for, you fasted for, what you believed for. It's the warrior's harvest. It's the harvest that's connected to your purpose, to your destiny, to your family. It's the harvest in your life that's connected to those closest to you. But I want to just begin now to biblically articulate and prophetically declare the following statement. Nothing will be able to rob your harvest. Nothing will be able to contaminate your harvest. How about this? I believe that we're going to see some unexpected things. What if I tell you that in the midst of one of the craziest decades in human history, that some people sitting in this room that will get a hold of this word are about to reap the biggest harvest they have ever reaped in their life? Is there anybody that really has the faith enough to believe that? See, that takes a lot of faith. Because you're looking around and we're in a place of suffering. We're in an age of suffering right now. We're under attack. The people of God are under attack. All over the world. Christians are being persecuted like never before in other nations, being killed. But I believe that there are some Gideons that God is raising up. There's some warriors sitting on these seats today that he's raising up. And I believe that we are about to reap the greatest harvest ever. You can refuse to believe it if you want to, but all I know is the last 2 years in my life, in Jessica's life, we have just taken the limits off of God. We have just said, God, whatever you want to do in us, through us, you do what you want to do. And I'm telling you right now, you can just sit there and not believe it if you don't want to, but I'm walking in one of the greatest blessed seasons of my life because I made up my mind I was going to take the limits of who I thought God was off, and I was just going to let him be God in every area of our life. Our life isn't perfect, but I'm telling you, we are walking in one of the most blessed seasons we've ever walked through right now. But it's because we had the faith enough to believe that God wanted to do something in us and through us. And I'm here today to tell you that he wants to do the exact same thing in and through you. If you can just get the faith enough to believe that he wants to release a Gideon spirit in you. Something amazing is coming for everybody who wants everything God has for them, for everyone who's been sowing. So I want to tell you, if you've been sowing through your prayer life, through your giving life, through your worship, your praise, if you've been sowing and asking God, Lord, when is it harvest time? When am I going to reap? I came today to say, put a smile on your face and a shout on your lips, because I believe when Jesus says it's harvest season, you better get ready, because you're about to reap. Judges 6, 9, and 10. He said, I rescued you from the Egyptians, from all who oppressed you. We read this just a minute ago. Look at verse 10. I told you I'm the Lord your God. You must not worship the other gods, but you have not listened to me. The Lord said, I've rescued you. I brought you out of slavery. I've provided for you supernaturally. I've done all these things, and I asked for one thing in return. Don't worship anybody but me. And they couldn't listen to that. Can I put the same question to us this morning? Is there anybody here that the Lord rescued you out of your bondage of sin? out of the things that once held you a slave. Come on, there were addictions and hang-ups and relationships. There were things that once bound you, but the Lord has released you from all that. And he says, I will do it for you time and time again. There's one thing I ask from you. Don't worship anybody or anything else but me. If God did it for Gideon, I believe the same God that's alive today will do it for us. Because God never changes. Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Isaiah 40:8. The grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of God will stand forever. Numbers 23:19. God is not a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. God is the same. He's the same as he was when this word was inspired and written. He's the same as he was when he breathed into creation. And he's the same as he was last year, last month, last week. The same God is still the God that we serve today, and he's the God that will provide for you time and time again. Do you believe that today? So I'm here to tell you that whatever God's promised you, it will come to pass. I don't care what the news outlets say. I don't care what your bank account says. I don't care what your medical records say, what your My Chart says. I don't care what it looks like around you. If God said it will happen, you will live to see it. He will fulfill it, and you will experience that. He is still in the business of rescuing people from oppression, of driving out enemies, of giving us a promise, but he just asks for one thing. Don't worship anybody or anything else but me. That's the exchange. That's the exchange. I'll drive out your enemies. I'll provide for you supernaturally. I'll bless you in your household. There's one thing I ask from you. Don't worship anybody else but me. But they couldn't do it. They worshiped the God of the Amorites, and what happened? They were enslaved and they lost everything. Let me just submit this to us this morning, that some of the hell that falls on our life arrives because our worship stands compromised. Some of the hell that falls on our life, I'm not saying all. There's some situations we cannot help, and the enemy is just doing his best to just get you defeated here and here. But some of the hell that falls on some of our lives falls on us because our worship stands compromised. We worship everything but God. See, the Bible says they had a form of godliness, but they denied its power. We have people today that, millions of people that attend church with a head knowledge, but their heart is so far from him. And for so many people, their worship stands compromised. We will put everything else before the Lord. We worship ideologies, we worship race, we worship culture, we worship sex, we worship politics, we worship money, we worship status, we worship trends, we worship other people, we worship moments. How about this? We worship our kids. I encourage you, Francis Chan put an incredible message out years ago that talked about that. That we can make our kids and our grandchildren an idol. We can. I love mine. I know you would too. I'd die for them right now if I had to. But we have parents. Help me, somebody. They will give their kids everything in the world except this. And this is the only thing that can save their soul. I'm looking right now, and there's several people I grew up with. My heart was heavy this morning because I've got a few friends that they quote, raised their family in church. If you looked on a sheet of paper, they seemingly did all the right things. But it was just more of a religious checkbox. And they never really allowed the Lord to completely overtake their heart and their mind and their convictions, and make sure that what they did for 2 hours on Sunday was lived out Monday through Saturday. And now the kids are grown, want nothing to do with the Lord, nothing to do with the church. We've got to make sure, church, that our worship is not compromised. Some of us in here, we have prodigals we're praying for. You did all the right things. You lived it at home. You were the example of love and truth and mercy and justice and peace. You lived all that, and that's why we prayed for that this morning, because we are believing for every single soul to be saved. But I feel led to just remind us that sometimes hell falls on our life because our worship stands compromised. But the world is hungering for a group of people, a church, who don't worship anyone but Jesus. It's time for a group of people to rise up who have the audacity to declare that we're not going to worship anything or anyone except Jesus Christ. There's only one person that's going to prompt me to worship. There's only one person that's worthy of my praise, my adoration, and that's the one who died for the forgiveness of my sins. It's the one who on the third day resurrected, came back to life, the one who sent his Holy Spirit and filled me, and his name is Jesus Christ. Is there anybody in the room that knows the name that I'm talking about? We will not waver in our worship. We're not going to prostitute our praise. We're going to worship the one true God with everything we have. Is that anybody in the room this morning? God is spirit, so those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. John 4:24, Psalm 95:6. Oh, come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. We need a church that knows how to worship. We need a church that knows how to kneel and pray before the Lord. Romans 12:1, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Worship is where it's at. Worship is what gets the Father's attention. He inhabits of his people. Your ideologies don't get God's attention. Your checkbook does not get God's attention. Your opinion does not get God's attention. Our religion does not get God's attention. You know what prompts him to look over the seals of heaven and say, oh, hang on for it? It's when his children worship him. Worship is where it's at. We can't keep worshiping the stuff that's out there in culture, ideologies, constructs, systems of man. No more getting distracted by the metaphorical Midianites around us. Gideon was a hidden warrior. He was hiding in a pit, in a wine press. The church, I believe, today is full of hidden warriors. The hidden warrior is so powerful. See, especially since 2020, that I'm telling you, I know there was a lot of people that we lost. I lost a grandfather to COVID. But I'm telling you, I believe there was a demonic spiritual agenda behind that whole thing. And I believe it sought to suppress and silence the voice and the credibility of the church. And we still have churches and people and Christians and pastors that are still hiding out in the pit, hiding out in the wine press. Some of you still know people that have still not returned to the fellowship since COVID. And they're still hiding. But we have warriors that are hiding in pits that God is calling out and saying, listen, there is a war that is raging out there right now. And I need some Gideons in this culture to stand up that will have the boldness and the faith enough to believe that I'm going to go before them. I'm going to prepare the way, and I'm going to empower them to do everything I called them to do. Gideon was a hidden warrior. The church is full of hidden warriors. And the hidden warrior's worship is powerful. But here's what I want to give you today. I want to teach you something real quick. The hidden warrior not only knows how to worship, but the hidden warrior knows how to worship in spirit and in truth and align themselves through a prophetic encounter with God's will. Hidden warriors can tell when heaven shows up on their behalf. Verse 11. That's where it says the angel of the Lord came. If you study this story, the angel of the Lord appeared as a weary passerby, as a traveler. See, you've got to be careful. You never know when you're entertaining angels unaware. See, we hear the word angels and we think they're just going to show up as these white feathered heavenly beings with wings and 20 eyeballs or whatever, you know. That's what we think. But if you look at verse 11, it says that the angel of the Lord showed up. But if you study it, I encourage you, do your Google and biblical due diligence. The angel of the Lord appeared as a traveler, coming by to catch a rest under that tree, under some shade. We've had days like that around here recently. And you get tired and you find a spot of shade in your neighborhood on your walk, and you get in that shade and suddenly start striking up a conversation with a neighbor. It's a common thing. But the angel of the Lord came, and here's what I want you to get. Gideon, in replying, addresses him first in a style equivalent in Hebrew to sir. So if you look at this, verse 12, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Verse 13, sir, Gideon replied. If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? None of you have ever talked like that about God, have you? Come on, if God loved me, he wouldn't let this happen to me. He wouldn't let... I've done it. Then the Lord turned to him and said, go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you. Look how he pivots. First, he calls him sir because it's just an encounter with a traveler, a passerby. But Gideon recognizes, wait a minute. This isn't just a chance encounter. Heaven just showed up. Oh, I'm about to preach like a madman now. So he pivots. Verse 13, Gideon's saying, come on, if God was really with us, why is he letting all this stuff happen? Didn't our ancestors tell us this and this and that? Where is God at? But once he airs his grievances, can I tell you, God's not afraid for you to air your grievances. He's a big enough God, he can handle it. But the key is, can you recognize when heaven shows up in your situation? And do you know how to pivot? First he calls him sir, but then in verse 15 he says, but Lord, Gideon replied. He went from complaining about his situation to saying, okay, Lord, I sense you're here now. What do I have to do? What do you need from me? See, we've got to get a church again that understands that God moves on our behalf still just like he did then. And it's okay to have a pity moment, but it's not okay to have a pity lifestyle. And there comes a moment where you've got to recognize and realize heaven has finally shown up on your behalf. God is ready to produce a harvest in your hands. And it's time to pivot from complaining to worship and recognizing that God is still on the throne regardless of my situation, regardless of what I'm facing and what I'm fighting. And I have to recognize when heaven shows up on my behalf. Gideon was able to sense something different in the moment. And he pivoted as soon as he sensed heaven had just shown up. But the hidden warrior also has a platform, which ironically enough is something you would not suspect. It's the wine press. I want to talk about the wine press for just a minute. He was in a wine press. Nathan, you want to help me out? Come up here. I didn't tell him I was going to do this. You ain't going to be able to see him real good, but that's the point. This is your pit over here. Can you come stand down here? And thank God it's fall. I went to Target and found this very terrible wheat. All right, Gideon, get down in your pit. Can you stay here with me for a few minutes? Yeah. All right, there's your wheat. Get down in your pit. I'll tell you when you can come out. You good? Let me know if you get too tired back there. So that's Gideon. He's in the wine press. If you don't know what it was, this was literally a hole in the ground. See, the Midianites were listening because they would thresh wheat on the side of cliffs. And it was they called it winnowing. They would use the wind, and it would separate the parts they needed from the rest of it they didn't need. And so it was a loud process. And it was a process. You could see stuff flying up in the air. And so you knew when someone was threshing wheat. And Gideon's trying to feed his family. He's getting desperate. Hear me today, church. He's getting desperate. And so he's threshing wheat at the bottom of a wine press. See, the wine press didn't have wooden floors. It was bare ground, so it was quiet, but there's no wind. He is so desperate to hide and to reap a harvest. God, I wish somebody would get this today. He was so desperate to reap his harvest for his family that he was willing to do whatever he had to do to protect the harvest from the enemy. Oh, hear me, church, today. See, when the angel of the Lord found Gideon, he was hiding out in the bottom of a pit. Let me tell you, he was not on a stage with a microphone. He was not in a palace with a title. When the angel of the Lord found Gideon, he didn't have his 2 million social media followers. He wasn't an influencer. He wasn't at his bougie beach house down at Carolina or Wrightsville. He was at the bottom of a wine press threshing wheat to hide the harvest from the enemy. But he wasn't just in a pit. Some translations say he was in the bottom. Somebody say the bottom. The bottom of the pit. He was in the bottom of the pit hiding the harvest, and that's where heaven called him out. That's where heaven found him. That's where heaven said, hey, you, mighty hero, mighty warrior, God is calling you. I've got great plans for you. Heaven didn't find him when he was on top of the world, but when he was in the bottom of his pit, that's where heaven found him. And I'm here to tell you today that you may be in life's wine press right now. You may be at the bottom of your pit right now. You may be at your lowest moment right now. You may be even trying to hide your harvest, because some of you know what it's like to lose your harvest. Can I talk to those people for just a minute? Some of you have lost some harvest in past seasons. You know what I'm talking about. You know what it's like to lose it. So you become desperate enough to keep what you've got left. You don't want the enemy to steal anything else. But I'm telling you, somebody needs to smile today, because the God that we serve is not the God that calls the people that are already on the platform and have the title. He's the God that finds us in the middle of our pit, at the bottom of our pit. And he calls us not by where we're at, but he calls us by who he created us to be. The God that we serve is the God that calls people out of the bottom of their situation and uses them not only to reap a harvest for themselves, but everyone connected to them. So our God's the God of the wine press. He's the God of the pit. He's the God that invades the pit and then takes you to the palace, takes you out of your desert, and then takes you to the promised land. That's where heaven found him. He found him in the bottom of the wine press. So let me ask you. Some of you, you're here right now. You're in a pit. Life has got you ostracized, fearful, anxious, fill in the blank. Some of you, that's where you're at right now. But let me tell you that some of the greatest miracles and some of the greatest revelations are not received on the platform. They're received in the pit. Some of the greatest conversations that you will have with the Lord don't happen when you're on top of the world. It happens when you're in the pit. Am I talking to anybody today? Heaven meets you in your wine press. Your location does not determine your destination. Let me say that again. Where you are right now does not determine what God has next for you, because your now is not your next. It does not determine where you're going. So you got to say, you know what? Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, ma'am. But don't define me by my wine press. Don't define me by my pit, because it's in my pit that heaven found me, and I know what God has for me is greater than anything I could dream of. What God has for my children and my grandchildren, I can't even begin to fathom it. So you know what? If I've got to spend a few minutes in a pit, so be it, because that's where heaven finds warriors. Come on, are we okay today? I need some of us to, I feel like we need some faith to rise up in this room today, because I get your calls. I get your texts. I know some of us in here today, we're struggling in a pit right now. But I'm trying to just embolden some people with some faith to tell you, God sent me by today to tell you, you don't have to be defined by your pit. Heaven meets you in the wine press. And I believe that we're about to see a church emerge out of the wine press and shine like never before. I believe the church is tired of hiding. I believe the church is tired of being in the pit. I believe the church is about to stand up. And I believe the church is about to declare, don't touch our children. Don't touch our families. Don't touch our values. Hands off, enemy. That is territory you cannot approach. That belongs to the Lord. There's a church that is poised and ready to come out of the wine press. And I believe that God's about to produce a platform out of somebody's pit in this room. Oh, Lord. Here's the next part. You good back there, Gideon? All right. I'm going to get you out of there in just a minute. This is a little bit unorthodox. But hidden warriors will convert their wine press into a threshing floor. Let me break it down. Verse 11, like we said, he was threshing wheat at the bottom of a wine press. He was threshing wheat, not on a threshing floor. Not on the side of a cliff. He was threshing wheat at the bottom of a wine press. Numbers 18:27, the Lord will consider this offering to be your harvest offering, as though it were the first grain from your own threshing floor or wine from your own wine press. I put this scripture in there to substantiate the fact that a wine press is not a threshing floor. Two different things, two different purposes. He was doing the right thing in the wrong place. You don't thresh wheat in a pit. As we said, you usually do it next to rocks on a cliff where the wind would separate the chaff from the wheat. It's usually above ground where you do this at. It has to be above ground in order for the wind to do the work. It's the way they did the Old Testament, even some of the New Testament. That's the way that they thresh wheat. No one threshes wheat in a pit, but he did. He did. I talked about it a minute ago. His people were starving. He got so desperate. Hey, show me the wheat, Gideon. Wave it around. All right, can y'all see the wheat kind of through there? All right, he's got the wheat. He got so desperate. He said, I don't know if this is going to work. But I'm going to have to do something that's never been done before so that I can feed the people I love. Hear me, church of the living God. Now listen, I'm going to be real with you. I'm just going to convert to teaching. That's fine. If this is going to be more of a teaching day, that's fine. I need somebody to get this word today because I know there's some people in here that this is a word for you. I know it is. Gideon said, I can't risk my children starving anymore. My family, my people. So he was willing to do something that was completely unorthodox in order to feed those that he loved. Church, can I tell you, if you want to feed your children and your grandchildren spiritually, you've got to be willing to do some unorthodox things because the enemy knows what you're doing. And the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And if the church of this day and this hour is going to be effective in reaching that generation and the generation that's in that room back there, we've got to start thinking like Gideon. Are we okay today? Are we good? I feel like I'm looking at a calf at a new gate this morning. It was like last week and this week are two different churches. Are we good today? Okay. Listen, if we're going to be effective in this city, we're going to have to understand the way Gideon thought, and we're going to have to convert our thinking like this as a church. And we're going to have to say, you know what? The old way of threshing wheat ain't working because every time we start doing it, the enemy knows what we're doing and he comes in and robs the harvest. So it's time for us to start thinking outside of the box and threshing wheat in a little bit of a different way. Are you hearing me this morning? Gideon did that. He said, you know what? I gotta feed my people. I gotta feed those that I love because if not, they're gonna starve. And if I don't want them to starve, I can't just keep going out and doing the same thing because what is the definition of insanity? doing the same thing, expecting different results. If you're going out and threshing wheat the traditional way every single day, every single week, and the enemy keeps coming in and robbing the harvest, the definition of insanity is to keep threshing wheat the same way. So Gideon says, all right, I've got to think a little bit outside the box. I got to do something that's never been done before. And the people are coming by and probably thinking, Gideon, you are an idiot. That's not how you thresh wheat. What are you doing, son? You're supposed to be up there on the cliff. You're supposed to be at the threshing floor. Gideon, what are you doing? Come on, that sounds like a bunch of religious people right there, don't it? Come on, what are you doing it that way? Why are you singing that? Why are you doing that? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Because we just want to keep threshing wheat in the church the way we've always threshed wheat. But I got news for you. The enemy is after your harvest. And it's time for some people to say, you know what? Lord, teach us a different way to thresh some wheat so that we can feed those that we love. There we are. He got so desperate. He said, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but my people have to eat. So he started threshing wheat in a wine press. And that's the moment. See, there's a couple of different ways you can look at this. You can look at this as fear. And I preached that angle a couple of weeks ago, that Gideon was scared. But another school of thought, if you study this, doesn't have as much to do with fear as much as it does him being a leader and saying the way y'all are doing it over there ain't working. So if that's what you want to keep doing, go ahead and keep being ineffective, but I'm going to come over here and I'm going to thresh my wheat somewhere where I know the enemy isn't going to hear me, the enemy's not going to touch it, and I'm going to be able to feed those that I love. And that's where the angel of the Lord shows up. Heaven didn't show up on the cliff where everybody else was doing the normal thing. Are you hearing me this morning? Heaven shows up when Gideon is in the pit, and the angel looks at him and he doesn't say, Gideon, what are you doing? You're not threshing wheat where you're supposed to thresh wheat. The angel doesn't say, Gideon, that's not going to work. The angel doesn't give him a list of reasons to say, Gideon, there's no wind here. This isn't going to work. What are you doing? Heaven shows up and says, mighty warrior, mighty hero. He looks at the man who had the audacity to do the right thing, what people were saying was the wrong place and the wrong time, and he calls him a mighty warrior. He was doing the right thing where you're not supposed to be doing the right thing. Can I tell us this morning, we're living in that culture today. There's some of us, we're still trying to do the right thing in places where people don't want the right thing. See, the schools don't want our Jesus. The systems don't want our Jesus. The government offices don't want our Jesus. The marketplace doesn't want our Jesus. But can I tell you today that if there are some people in Wilmington, North Carolina that will stand up and say, you know what, I don't care if it's popular, I don't care what the city says, I don't care what people say, I'm going to be a Gideon in a lost generation, and I'm going to thresh some wheat, and I'm going to reap my harvest. Gideon refused to permit his drama to define his destiny. He didn't allow his circumstance to hinder his harvest. So he acted differently. Get this, church. And he rejected conventional wisdom. It's not where you're supposed to thresh wheat. It's where you make wine. You put the grapes in and you press them and you make wine. That's not where you thresh wheat. Ecclesiastes, Solomon said this in Ecclesiastes 11:4. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. Leave that up for just a minute, please. Church, listen. I hope over 2 years we have proven to you that we love you, we respect you, and that we don't feel God sent us here to be a threat to Brookfield Church. But I'm going to tell you what, I've got a burden for these lost people that are in this city. I've got a burden for our young people, knowing the schools they're walking into every single day and what they're facing and what they're fighting, and how much of the really just how much hell they are walking into every day that is trying to just starve them spiritually. And I'm burdened for it. And please don't misunderstand me. Brookfield Church is a wonderful place. It is. But if we want to be a Gideon in a Midianite world, we got to start threshing some wheat differently around here. I know this is tough. But if we're going to feed the ones that we're connected to, the ones that we love, we have got to allow heaven to give us some wisdom. And we got to think outside the box. And we cannot keep conforming to the conventional wisdom of, quote, how church is done. We can't. That's why I'm doing this Wednesday night series, Rethinking the Church. Because much of the church today, my conviction, much of the church today is ineffective in truly discipling people. We're really good at drawing crowds. We're really good at making people feel good about their current circumstance. But we're really terrible at empowering them and enabling them with the resources and the word and the spiritual life, the spiritual maturity they need to go and fight these things on their own and be a Gideon in a Midianite world. And if Brookfield Church is going to be, I'm not just talking about filling up the room. I couldn't care less about filling up the room. I'm being honest with you. I want God to send whoever He wants to send, but whoever He sends, I want to be faithful in discipling you and equipping you to be able to be Gideon in a Midianite world. That's my goal. And if we do that with 50 people, 500 people, or 5,000 people, I don't care. I just want to be faithful to what God has called us to do. But church, I'm telling you this morning, if we're going to be a Gideon in a Midianite culture, because it's out there, we've got to start threshing wheat differently. Are you receiving this? I know this is tough. We've got to start thinking differently. We have to start being willing to try things we've never tried before. I'm not talking about compromising this book right here. I'm not saying that at all. I think I've done a pretty good job of proving that I'm going to preach truth whether it's popular or not. I don't mean to be arrogant, but I've preached some hard things in this pulpit, and I'm going to keep doing it. But what I'm telling you, we can't put names in a box and say we're praying for their souls, but say, God, the only way that we're going to let you reach them is if you do it the way that we've been threshing wheat all along. If you want this box to get empty, then it's time for some of us to say, you know what? Maybe we got to start threshing wheat a little bit differently around here. Maybe we got to just reject conventional wisdom and say, okay, Lord, what can we do? What are you calling us to do? He had a specific purpose and a calling for Gideon to go and be the leader of his people and to rescue an entire nation out of slavery. And I believe that God has saved this church. This church should have gone down with the pandemic, but God had His hand over. And it's because I believe this is a Gideon in a Midianite world. It's time for Brookfield Church to start threshing some wheat in the bottom of the wine press. Is this making sense? I'm almost done. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. In other words, there's always an excuse why something won't work. There's always going to be a reason why something won't work. Every single one of us can think of 10 different reasons why the best things we've enjoyed in our life, we should have rejected them. Think about it. Think about the jobs that you took. How many of you were ready financially to have children when you had children? Oh, wow, not one hand. Shocking. But you did it anyway. Why? Because you understood that what was on the other side of your present circumstance far outweighed what you were going through right now. And you were willing to step out in a little bit of faith to say, you know what? That baby boy, that baby girl, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tight. I'm going to have to change my thinking. I'm going to have to do some things, but it's worth it. Can we just get that same boldness and that same feeling about the church of the living God and say, you know what? It may not look like we can do this right now or that right now, but God, I'm bold enough to believe that if I'll just put one foot in front of the other, you'll provide every single time if we just learn to thresh wheat wherever we got to. God appears, here's the word. God appears at the most unexpected time, in the most unexpected place. He uses the most unexpected person to do the most unexpected thing. I believe we're about to reap a harvest. I really believe this church is about to reap a harvest. Are we willing to make our wine press a threshing floor? Are we willing to make our pit the platform for our miracle? Are we willing to allow God to use our hardship to be the catalyst for our harvest? See, some of us, we think that we're just supposed to be on the platform, on the mountaintop, on the peak, all through life, and God just keeps blessing and blessing and blessing and blessing. But that's not often how it works. Sometimes the greatest blessings that come from our life are when we walk through a valley of hell, if I can say that word. It's when we lose everything. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You were in a place one time where you literally lost everything. So you had nothing to lose. So you just started hanging on to the Lord. And the Lord found you in your pit, called you a mighty hero, a mighty warrior, and said, I've got something great for you. And if you will go, I'm sending you. If you will go and do what I'm about to prepare you to do, I will show up in your life, and heaven will always show up for you. There's a generation that's starving. There's a world that's starving for righteousness, but it's up to the church to finally come out of the winepress. We live in a Midianite age of the 21st century where they're going to continue to steal our harvest, enslave our children, indoctrinate our children, continue to prompt us to hide in the proverbial caves. But I have news for those Midianite spirits today. There's an army of Gideons that are coming out of the winepress that are going to say, get your hands off our harvest, get your hands off of our seed. They belong to God. They don't belong to you. And in the name of Jesus, they will become everything God called them to be. Musicians, come. I'm done. Gideon, you still back there? All right. I'm about to get you out of the wine press. Gideon went into hiding to feed his family. Now, I'm going to speak prophetically to this house today. If you're newer here, I hope you'll become part of this family. I sincerely do. There's some good things happening here. There really are. Gideon spent a season hiding to provide for his loved ones, his family, those around him. But then heaven showed up and said, all right, it's time to come out. I'm calling you out of the wine press, and I'm calling you to go lead the charge. Hear me, church. I'm not trying to be weird or freaky or anything, but I'm being serious. I feel a prophetic unction this morning. This church has been in hiding for about, 10 years. Literally. How many of you just happen to say, this looks like a nice neighborhood. Let me go drive around and see if there's a church back there. No. Every person that is in this building today, you were here because you intended to come to Brookfield Church. This is not one of those churches where you just ride by and it looks like a nice facility on the side of a main road and you go, oh, let me go try that out. This is a nice place. But this ain't the place that you see from the side of the road. Maybe if you're flying a drone, you'll see it. That's the only way. But this church has been in hiding. I'm going to say something, and I mean this. I do not mean this to be harsh one bit. I don't. But I really believe the Lord has shown Jessica and I what He wants to do with this church. And it is a church that is incredibly effective in this city to disciple people in the Word, give them a place to encounter His Spirit and be filled and baptized in the Holy Ghost. And it's a church that will send countless people out into the world to spread what we do right here. I'm telling you, this is going to be a little bold here, okay? But I hope over 2 years we have proven to you how much we love you and respect this house. We do. We love being here. I'm telling you the truth. We want to raise our kids here. We hope you will have us for years and years to come, because we have no intentions of having to go anywhere else unless you just get tired of us. Hopefully that's not happening. But I'm telling you right now, we are at an inflection point as a church. Okay? I'm not going to put any of this on YouTube. I'm going to cut this part out because I'm speaking to the house right now. Next month makes 2 years that we've been your pastors. And it has been an amazing 2 years. We've loved every minute of it. But church, it's time to get busy. Okay? We've had 2 years for you to get to know us get to know you, us kind of find the footing of the identity of the house. And the Lord's given us 2 years to pour into you and minister to you. And don't misunderstand me, we're going to continue to do that. But I believe with all my heart that we are at an inflection point. I believe that God has had His hand on this house. And let me say this, if you're newer here, this is going to sound like there's like some junk happening underneath the surface. There's not. This is a great, healthy church. Right? Come on, core. It's a good place. They love each other. It's okay. Yeah, come on. I love it. I don't want you to take from this that we're having a split or some trouble, at least not that I'm aware of. If that's happening, will you please let me know? I think we're good. Are we good? Give me a thumbs up. Are we good? But listen to me. We started out with about 45 of you 2 years ago. Now we're running anywhere between 95 and 120. Depending on if everybody that is active in this church showed up on one Sunday, we'd be between 120 and 130. That's where we'd be at, up from 45. Now hear me. We're not perfect. But there is one thing that I am very, very proud of, and I don't mean this arrogantly. But to my knowledge, everyone that we started with the exception of one that found him a lady and moved away, all of those people have stuck with us for these 2 years. That does not happen in pastoral transitions. It doesn't. Usually, 10 to 15, sometimes 20% of the people step away from a church when there's a pastoral change. And I don't attribute that to us. I attribute every bit of that to Jerry and Kelly Andrews, because we could not have asked for a better person to train us and to hand the baton off to us the way they did. For 2 years, you have stuck with us. You have believed, you have fasted, you have served, you have worked, you have prayed, you have given. Thank you. But hear me today in the prophetic. God has had His hand over this house all along for this moment right here. We've been in the wine press. This church has been hidden for a long time. But I believe that heaven has shown up this month and said, Brookfield Church, it's time to come out of the wine press. And it's time for you to go out and lead the charge in your city. Hear me. But for us to feed who God is calling us to feed, we're going to have to thresh wheat in a way that we've never threshed wheat before. Church is going to look different. There will be parts of it that will, and I hope you're not taking this as a threat. I'm not threatening anything. I'm not. But what I'm saying is we can either continue to do church as usual and come in here and I can preach for 45 minutes or an hour and make you feel good and all tingly and send you on your way. Or we can make up our mind that we want to be an effective house in this city, a Gideon in a city of Midianites that God can use and send out to do unprecedented things. I believe we can do it. But listen to me. Children's ministry is going to look different. Youth ministry is going to look different. Sunday services may look different. I'm not talking about style. I'm not. But what if we come in one Sunday and it's just a call to prayer? And we spend an hour and a half on our face before the Lord in these altars on a Sunday morning. If the Lord prompts us to do that, can we be that church? If we want to reach that box, and if we want to reach this culture, we're going to have to accept the fact that in the midst of an onslaught of a war that for our kids and our children's children and our families, we've got to learn to thresh wheat in a way we've never threshed wheat before. Amos 9:13-15 says, yes, indeed, it won't be long till God's decree. Things are going to happen so fast, your head will swim. One thing fast on the heels of the other. You won't be able to keep up. Everything will be happening at once. Everywhere you look, blessings. Blessings. I've been praying that scripture over this house for the last 2 weeks. Because I feel it. I'm telling you, I feel like I'm drowning. I really, not in a bad way. There are so many things in the works behind the scenes. I'm excited, but I feel like, Lord, I can't keep up. Can you just slow down just a little bit for me? But I've been praying this over you and over this house because I believe this is what God's doing. I believe that we're about to enter a season. If you will get this word, church, and if you will trust us, I believe this box is going to be empty. I mean, I believe with all of my heart, I believe this box will be empty. But are we willing to thresh wheat in a way that other people say you can't thresh wheat? Are we willing to preach in a way that other churches won't preach? Are we willing to love in a way that other churches aren't willing to love? Are we willing to give in a way that other churches are not willing to give? Are we willing to go outside of ourselves and our preferences? I'm not talking about just in the church house. I mean, are we willing to get some teams together and go send? Miss Diane Brewer, she came up to me and she's got some phenomenal outreach ideas that we're working on right now. I want us to be that church that even though we're hidden in the back of a neighborhood, God says, hey, yeah, I know all these other churches got main property, but I'm calling you out of the wine press and I'm about to use you there. Are you with me? Here's how I want to end. Stand with me. Gideon, you still there? Y'all get ready now. Get ready. Psalm 65:11, you crown the year with a bountiful harvest. Even the hard pathways overflow with abundance. Even your hard pathways will overflow with abundance. I receive that. Is there anybody that receives this word today? Come on, if that's you, I want you to raise your hands. We're going to make some declarations here. I want everyone, if you feel inclined, if you receive this message, I just want you to repeat this after me. My wine press just became my threshing floor. Can we say that over Brookfield Church, that our pit just became our platform? Come on, do you believe that today? So Gideon, you ready? Here's what I want you to do. And we're going to worship. But I believe in the Spirit when He stands up holding His harvest, holding that wheat. I believe it's symbolic of this church for you individually, for your family, and this ministry collectively. God is calling us out of the winepress today, and we are about to take the charge in this city. We're about to take the charge in this region, and we will see our sons and our daughters call in the name of the Lord. They will prophesy. God will use them. He will call them into ministry. We're going to develop preachers right here. We're going to develop teachers right here. They're going to go into this. Revival isn't going to happen in these altars. It's going to happen out there, and then we're going to bring them in here and teach them the word. Come on, Gideon, you ready? 1, 2, 3. Come on, if you believe it, I want you to give him the biggest praise you've given him this year. I believe a harvest is coming for you. I believe a harvest is coming for this house. I believe it in the name of Jesus.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's broadcast. If you are interested in hearing more of Pastor Travis's sermons or teaching, please visit us online at brookfieldchurch.life. You can also connect with us on social media platforms. If you have a specific request we can help you pray for, please feel free to contact us by emailing contact@brookfieldchurch.life. Have a blessed day.